So let's move on to the next category here. As well, as we just said, the Rams, so far, I think we have a consensus that this has been one of the most disappointing teams this year. But as a result, we are a quarter of the way through this season, and there are some NFL teams that have met their expectations, exceeded expectations, and then finally those that have not met expectations. So Ben, let's start with you here. Which NFL team has been the most disappointing thus far?
Yeah, despite how the Rams have played, based on kind of how their schedule was, I'm not incredibly shocked. They've been worse than average, but worse than expected. But the most disappointing team has to be the Las Vegas Raiders. Not the Los Angeles Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, who just lost a heartbreaker in Kansas City on Monday night. The problem with the Raiders is they can't play 4 quarters of football. They play some really good halves. They were up 20-0 against the Cardinals after the first half, up 17-0 versus the Chiefs, and then it was vice versa where they played good second halves against the Chargers and Titans. But then the other half, they completely disappear, like worst team in the NFL disappear, where Carr can't move the football, the defense can't stop anyone. They need to put it together for 4 quarters. Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller have been incredibly disappointing. They have 280 receiving yards combined. And you're talking about Renfrow, who had 1,000 yards last year, and Waller, who's regarded as one of the best tight ends in the league. They have been nowhere near what was expected, especially when you think coming into the season, you knew Devontae Adams was going to get his targets and his yards, but then you're thinking, man, cornerback 2s and cornerback 3s or linebackers are going to have to guard Renfrow and Waller. That's dangerous. And instead, they have been completely underwhelming. Matt Collins has even stolen the show from them on some occasions. They've buried themselves in the division to this point, and the worst part about it is they have 2 divisional losses. So it'd be slightly better if they were 1-4, but let's say the losses came to out-of-division teams. But the fact they've already lost to the Chargers and the Chiefs does them in a really bad spot for tie-breaking purposes later on the season should they climb out of this hole. They really needed to beat the Cardinals and the Titans. I think if they were 3-2 right now with the teams they've had to play, 3-2 I think would be completely fine for this team, and especially when you think about the fact that they had a 20-0 lead against Arizona and they were playing toe-to-toe with Tennessee up until the very end, had a chance to win it with a late touchdown. So those are games that they needed to grab against teams I think that they're better than, honestly, when you look at the roster. And they've just been underwhelming. No one expected them to be 1-4. I even saw some people thinking that they would be up near the top of this division coming off a playoff appearance last year and then getting better with the addition of Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams and a new play caller. But that's another thing, too. Josh McDaniels, I think,
has been awful.
Yeah, he's been underwhelming as a play caller. I never loved the signing to begin with, just because I didn't like what he did as a previous time as a head coach, and I know he's learned since then, but I just did not like, especially when the game has been moving so much more to these super young, creative minds. McDaniels is an offensive guy, but I don't know how well that New England system works anymore in this point in the NFL. I think it's more fit for a pocket passer style of offense when that's honestly not as much where the game has moved, and then that's, I think, has been part of their downfall. I don't think he's been great as a play caller. Defense is giving up about 25 a game, which isn't the worst, also not the best. So just all around, there's big problems with the team, although their schedule does lighten up now. So if they can win, I think I looked at the numbers, 5 out of the next 7, they give themselves a shot. But with kind of the culture of the Raiders and the history of the Raiders, they'll kind of bury themselves and lose a couple of games that they shouldn't. So they have to go on a run right now, but they've been overall disappointing.
Wait, I got a question for you. So obviously Rick Bisaccia was the interim head coach last year. Do you think he would have been a better fit than Josh McDaniels?
Correct. Yeah, totally. I would have hired someone different over both of them. I think there were better options last year, and I would have pushed harder for guys like Dable and McDaniel and O'Connell because I think younger and a more offensive mind is the way to go. But if you're choosing between those two, Bisaccia, I think without a doubt over McDaniels. And I know that's crazy considering Josh McDaniels is an offensive guy and Bisaccia is more like a special teams background, but there's some fits I think are just better than others, and Bisaccia I would have taken 100% based on how that end of the season went.
Also, Ben, what are they doing to my man, Devontae Adams? Oh, I know he chose that, but oh my gosh, dude.
I think in the long term that'll work out better still because I would rather take a rough year but then still have 4 more with Derek Carr than 1 to 2 with Rodgers and then the last 3 with whoever replaces him. But yeah, right now it's a little rough. I'm sure he's not too pleased because he's getting the numbers, just not the wins he was expecting. Although it's not like the Packers are high flying at this point in time either.
We have a winning record.
Yeah.
I'll hop in real quick with the Bengals as the most disappointing team. I mean, coming off of a Super Bowl appearance, I should say, along with the Rams. I mean, this team, they have pieces on offense that can do damage, and they are not showing up for that. They are well below average in in yards per game. They were 9th last year in points per game. They're 16th in points per game this year. I mean, they expect to repeat and go back to the Super Bowl and win this time. How can you do that if your offense, your trademark, is below average?
Yeah, the team I'm going to pick, and I don't know, you guys can say that this team doesn't count, but I wanted to pick Detroit. I understand that they're a bad team, but if you look at it, their first 3 games, they had the most points put up offensively, and they're still 1-4. I understand they're missing guys like Swift. He's a big part for them. They're missing him. They're missing Jameson Williams, who's obviously still out with his torn ACL. But I think if they had a good defense, this team could potentially be up in the NFC North right now. I mean, not in first, but they could definitely be up there. I mean, there's a bunch of games. I mean, you score 45 points and you lose. I mean, that just can't happen. Jared Goff has actually surprisingly looked really good, besides the fact of the Patriots game.
The downfall's coming.
The downfall's probably coming. Luckily, Luca was nice enough to trade me for Tom Brady. He understood that I was going to be pretty hurting.
Danny Dimes ain't lasting you.
No. So I want to go with Detroit simply because I do think that there was a lot of hype on this over this team, especially after finishing 3-13. I wouldn't say a lot of people had them maybe potentially thinking playoffs this year, but definitely like Adam said earlier before the show, definitely a little bit more step in the right direction, maybe getting a couple 6 more wins besides just those 3 wins. But I mean, 1-4, there's no reason why this team shouldn't be 2-2, maybe even 3-2. I mean, the defense has just really been horrible for them.
Historically,
yeah,
man.
And it's unfortunate because, like you said, they've put up multiple points in the first 4 games and they just can't win. Sorry, first 3 games they did get shut out by the Patriots, unfortunately, which is really bad. But I do think that this weekend's good for them. They have a bye. They have time to kind of regroup. Maybe Swift will come back. Maybe they'll get Jameson Williams back in the next couple of weeks. I know that a torn ACL is not the best, but obviously he's been looking really good in practice, but the Lions have said that it's probably going to be a little bit of a pushback for him. But hopefully the Lions can maybe start getting on a run here. If they can just win 2 consecutive games, I honestly think that's a win in the book. I mean, they have trouble trying to win consecutive games, and I do think that this team has what it takes to potentially go on a little run, and hopefully that happens this year. And if it doesn't, I mean, it's just another disappointing team for the Motor City.
And I want to comment real quick. I didn't get the chance to chime in on the Bengals. One of the big problems with the Bengals is I don't know how many coaches do less with what Zach Taylor has to work with than how Zach Taylor.
Well, part of it's
plays.
the offensive line too. It actually got worse.
I mean, yeah, that's a problem, but there is so little creativity. I mean, you looked at Jamar Chase's route tree from Sunday against the Ravens, and I know he didn't have T. Higgins. That obviously hurts, but there's still Tyler Boyd on the other side. But
you would never
for
know.
Chase, it was just short routes near the line of scrimmage or go balls up the sideline. I mean, he was least creative, I think, route tree and play calling I've seen in an elite wide receiver in the game. And there's so much talent on that offense; they could do so much more. And yet they got to 3rd and goal, 2nd and goal from the 2, and they ran a Philly special with their 3rd string wide receiver. And then 4th and goal, they ran the pitch play to the wide receiver cutting in on the line of scrimmage, and it obviously got blown up. So I think Zach Taylor does the head coach part right, and he's good for the team, good for morale, gets guys into it. But I don't love him as a play caller, which is crazy because he comes from the McVay tree, and it feels like literally everyone that comes from that is just this incredible head coach, play caller type of thing. And Zach Taylor is an instance where I think there's times where the talent is just so good to overcome his inefficiencies, but overall you're going to see stretches like this where they look slower offensively against the Steelers in Week 1 and the Ravens last week because I just don't think I don't think he's that good of a play caller.
Do you think this is actually worse than what the Browns were after they made it to the AFC Championship?
No, I think the Bengals still make the playoffs.
Okay.
I think as the season goes on, they'll figure some stuff out.
Okay.
But it's not the start that they predicted. Now the schedule is going to start getting tougher because they still have to play the Chiefs. They have to play the Bills. I think they go to Tennessee, which is not a great team, but it's a harder team to play on the road. So it's going to get tougher now.
Well, as long as you beat Derrick Henry, you'll win. Yeah. But listen, I'm going to give the obvious one, which is the Denver Broncos. But to give a better answer, it is definitely the Green Bay Packers. Okay? They are awful, okay? They are horrible, especially their defense against the run. It looks like the Bears against the run, but I'm going to just stick with the Broncos for this. Let Russ cook. That was the saying. Russ is cooked, okay? He is awful. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett. I mean, he definitely did not call the plays in Green Bay because I have never seen worse play calling than this. I mean, he's actually giving Matt Nagy a run for his money right now because that is how bad Nathaniel Hackett really is. I mean, the first game, you take the football out of Russell Wilson's hands to kick a 66-yard field goal. I have never seen anything dumber than that. They had a minute and a half to get down the field, and that's what you decide on. Then you go against the Indianapolis Colts. You keep the ball in Russell Wilson's hand as opposed to kicking the field goal to send it, or to rather tie it, and they didn't do that either. But, this is probably the most hyped football team over the offseason because of Russell Wilson. And obviously Nathaniel Hackett, the offensive guru, as we thought he was from Green Bay. Clearly he is not, because this is this is a non-creative offense. This offense stinks, okay?
On Hackett real quick, so
He's awful.
obviously LaFleur was calling the plays.
Clearly.
Right. You know who Hackett was calling the plays for before Green Bay?
Oh, no.
He was in Jacksonville calling plays with Blake Bortles, and obviously we know how bad that offense
that
looked.
makes sense because that was Saxonville. That had nothing to do with Blake Bortles.
Their offense looked horrible at that time too. So now we know. I mean, that was that was I think the last time he called play. I'm not for sure it was exactly the last time he called plays, but that was a stop on the Hackett ride, and at this rate it is going. He will not have a job. At least not as the Denver Broncos head coach this time next year.
The thing about the Denver Broncos that is really crushing is they have a very good defense. And you can thank Vic Fangio for that because he's the one that set that up. They hired Nathaniel Hackett so that way they can get the offense going. It has actually gotten worse since Vic Fangio has left. Drew Lock looked better under center than Russell Wilson does right now. I mean, you got to think about this because the soul-crushing, I even called this when I was watching the game, the soul-crushing end zone pick when Russell Wilson, I forgot who was aiming it towards, but Gilmore's the one that picked him off. But, Sutton, thank you. But, he looks completely overwhelmed by game management. Nathaniel Hackett is way above his head right now because he is awful. I think, honestly, these Denver Bronco fans are going to erupt really soon because that is how bad this team really is. Russell Wilson, he signed an extension of 5 years and $245 million. I don't know the cap hits through 2026, but you know what? This is going to be pretty bad for the long run because he is not going to get any better. I do not care what they said about his arm. It has nothing to do with that. Against the Indianapolis Colts, that was an inexcusable loss because the Colts are trash as well. Matt Ryan looks like he got actually worse as well. But you know what? The Denver Broncos season, I believe it is over because they cannot get anything done offensively. Jerry Jeudy is supposed to be looking like a superstar in that offense. You would never know he's on that team because apparently Russell Wilson can never get the ball to him. Javonte Williams went down, so that's not a good loss. I mean, you already know Melvin Gordon's going to fumble the football eventually. I mean, he stinks too. But you know what? The Denver Broncos, when you take a look offensively how bad this team really is, they are 31st in points per game, which is 15 points per game. That is worse than the Chicago Bears, just so you know for some context. Russell Wilson has a 36.5 QBR through 5 weeks. That is the third to worst in the entire National Football League. And when you watch the opening game between Geno Smith and Russell Wilson, you could tell who clearly was the better quarterback, and it is still true to this day. The Seahawks actually caught a break. The Seahawks clearly won this trade, which they get as the Denver Broncos get worse and worse. The Seahawks only get better high draft picks because Noah Fant, the last time I checked, is a pretty good player. Shelby Harris is a pretty good linebacker. But, the Texans game, I believe, it was the Texans game. That was more eye-opening to me because they couldn't blow out a bottom 5 team at home. That was very concerning for me. Now, granted, when they played the Raiders, clearly that was their best game in my opinion of the season. That's not saying much, by the way. But, I think against the Colts, that was yet another indictment on just how bad Nathaniel Hackett is at coaching and how bad Russell Wilson is in this system. He needs to seriously stop saying Broncos country, let's ride, because it's more let's die, okay? Because that is how bad this team is. It's a combination of abysmal play calling, coaching performance, and how bad Russell Wilson has gotten. I don't know what happened to him, but maybe the hits he took against the Seahawks the last couple of years, maybe that has something to do with that. But Russell Wilson, I'm sorry, I think he's done.
I don't know if I call him done because there's still plenty of time, and I'm not gonna call his career dead after a really bad 5-game stretch. And although it has been really bad, I do think he has hurt a little bit from the play caller, and I think has slightly tried to turn him into something he's not, which is standing still in the pocket. I think he's much better when he is on the move, and the field awareness for Wilson has been much, much worse. But I don't think we should completely call him done. Is he going to return to the peak Russell Wilson? Probably not. But he is not going to stay this bad for the entire rest of the season. I'm pretty confident that I am pretty confident.
We'll
that he
revisit
gets
this
better.
topic.
Yeah, I don't think all of it just disappears at the snap of your fingers. I think he's going to play better as the season goes on. Not that I'm saying Denver's going to turn into the team we thought they were, because I don't think they're capable of that with this current system and head coach, but I think we see subtle sights of improvement.
We actually have to watch this team again on Monday Night Football.
Correct.
Again.
Except, yeah.
Who
yeah,
they play, the Chargers?
The Chargers. That's
a better game,
I
'cause the
enjoy
Chargers will blow them
enjoy watching the Chargers. I don't know the Chargers blow them out because I think
they actually are injured, so they have an excuse.
The divisional matchups I think are always tough to see blowouts in, just because it's two teams that know each other so well.
Okay.
But the Chargers will make that game fun because the Chargers are fun.
I just have one more thing to add here about the Broncos. Let's take it off the field for a second. We saw KJ Hamler slamming his helmet at the end of the game. When that ball gets rolling and there are problems in the locker room, that's hard to stop. And then that leads to losses, and losses lead to anger. And it's just going to be a corrupt place to play soon if they don't turn things around quick.